Good morning, Liam. Those 3 words spoken by an old man with silver hair and worn clothes became the anchor in my chaotic life. I never thought a simple greeting could mean so much. In a world where people rush through their days barely noticing the person pouring their coffee. Henry Elridge was the only one who called me by name, every morning at Margie's Diner in Dallas, Texas. I'm Liam Walker, 34 years old, a single dad scraping by at the waiter in that rundown spot on the edge of South Dallas. The neon sign flickered like it was on its last breath. The checkered floor was sticky with years of spills, and the air smelled of burnt toast and stale grease. Customers came in waves, truckers grabbing eggs, office workers barking orders for black coffee. They called me, "Hey you," or "Buddy," and never bothering to glance at my name tag. I was invisible, just the guy refilling mugs and wiping counters. But Henry was different. He'd shuffle in at exactly 7:05, take his seat by the window facing east, unfold his newspaper, and wait. When I approached with his usual black coffee, no sugar, he'd look up his eyes, crinkling at the corners, and say it. "Good morning, Liam." It wasn't just polite. It felt like he saw me. In those brief moments, I'd feel a spark of warmth amid the grind of raising my daughter Emily alone. She's 7, with her mother's bright eyes and a laugh that could melt ice. Every night after my shift, I'd come home to our tiny apartment, tuck her in, and promise myself I'd give her a better life. One Monday morning, the clock hit 7:05, then 7:15. Henry's seat stayed empty. I stared at it, a knot forming in my stomach. Maybe he was sick, or just late. But the next day, same thing. By the 3rd day, the emptiness gnawed at me. I asked around the regulars, the cook, even the paper delivery guy. No one knew much about the old man. He was a mystery, always paying an exact change, never chatting with anyone else. On the 4th day, as I wiped down the counter, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up outside. A tall man in a crisp suit stepped out carrying an old leather briefcase. He scanned the diner, his gaze landing on me. "Mr. Liam Walker," he asked, voice steady and formal. I froze, rag in hand. "That's me. Can I help you?" He extended a hand. "Terrence Nolan. I'm here about Henry Elridge." My heart skipped. How could a simple greeting lead me to the biggest secret of my life, Liam Walker, that's me? 34 years old, scraping by in South Dallas, Texas, where the heat waves shimmer off cracked sidewalks and the air hums with distant traffic. I'm a single dad to Emily, my 7-year-old daughter who lights up my world with her sketches of horses and her wild dreams of becoming an architect just like her old man used to be. But Emily's got a heart condition, nothing too severe yet, but the doctors say it could worsen without regular checkups, the kind I can barely afford on my waiter's tips. Every night, I watch her sleep, her chest rising and falling steadily, and I swear to myself, I'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe. My days start before dawn. The alarm buzzes at 4:45 a.m., pulling me from a lumpy mattress in our cramped one-bedroom apartment. I shuffle to the kitchen, whip up oatmeal or toast for Emily, and leave a note on the table. "Daddy loves you more than the stars. Draw me a bridge today." Then I kiss her forehead while she's still dreaming, grab my faded uniform shirt, and catch the first bus to Margie's Diner. The ride is 20 minutes of jolts and fluorescent lights past graffiti-covered warehouses and sleepy strip malls. By 5:30, I'm clocking in the scent of brewing coffee and sizzling bacon, wrapping around me like an old habit. Margie's is a relic from another era, a corner spot with checkered linoleum floors worn thin from decades of footsteps, booths upholstered in cracked vinyl, and a neon sign in the window that buzzes like it's on its last leg. The regulars trickle in: truckers nursing hangovers, office drones grabbing to-go orders, a few night shift workers winding down. They bark their requests: black coffee extra strong, or scrambled eggs no salt, without ever looking up from their phones. To them, I'm just "Hey you," or Buddy, the invisible, hand-refilling mugs and clearing plates. My name tag might as well be blank. That's how it was until Henry Elridge showed up. I remember the first time like it was yesterday. It was a crisp fall morning, the kind where the Texas sun hasn't yet turned brutal. He shuffled in around 7:05, his silver hair tousled his shirt, frayed at the collars, and sat at the corner booth by the window, the one facing east, where the light streamed in like a promise. The cook Margie herself leaned over and whispered, "Don't bother with the old guy in the corner. He doesn't talk to anyone. Just black coffee and the special. Pays exact change and leaves." But something about him caught my eye. His posture straight but weary, like he'd carried the weight of the world and never complained. I ignored the advice, poured the coffee hot and black, and set it down with a smile. "Good morning, sir. Can I start you with this? Looks like it might rain. Later want some cream to warm it up." He didn't respond, just nodded once his eyes fixed in the newspaper he unfolded with trembling hands. No tip beyond the exact coins, no words. But I didn't mind. The next day I tried again. "Morning, sir. Coffee's fresh, brewed it myself. How about some toast? It's extra crispy today." Silence again, but he glanced up for a split second. Day 3. "Chilly out there. This'll warm you right up." By the end of the week, as I placed the mug down, he murmured, "Thank you." It was barely audible, but it felt like a crack in a wall. From there, it built slowly, like stacking bricks one by one. I'd comment on the headlines he was reading: "Rough news about the market today, huh?" And he'd grunt in agreement. One morning, I shared a bit about Emily. "My daughter's drawing horses again. Says she wants to build a stable one day." His eyes softened and he asked, "How old is she?" That was the turning point. Over the next weeks, our exchanges grew. I'd refill his coffee and he'd inquire, "How's Emily's drawing coming along?" I'd tell him about her latest sketch, her giggles when I praised her. He listened without interrupting, his face relaxing into something almost peaceful. Then came the rainy day. Henry arrived, soaked, his thin jacket clinging to him like defeat. I didn't hesitate. Grabbed a clean towel from the back, warmed it under hot water, and brought it over with an extra croissant on the house. "Here, sir. Dry off before you catch a cold. And try this. It's fresh." He stared at me, then the pastry, as if kindness was a foreign language. Finally, he said, "The world doesn't owe you kindness, Liam." It was the first time he used my name. I smiled back, because someone should. From that moment, he opened up more. Not floods of words, but enough mentions of old regrets, a lost sibling, the quiet ache of solitude. I'd share snippets of my past, too, how I used to be an architect, dreaming of community centers that brought people together, but after my wife's death and that complicated delivery, everything shattered. I buried my sketches in a tin box and focused on surviving. For Emily. Those 10 minutes each morning became my lifeline. In a diner full of noise and haste, Henry saw me, not just the waiter, but Liam, the dad, the dreamer. Little did I know he was hiding depths of his own layers I'd only uncover later. The days blurred into a haze of routine and unease after those first mornings without Henry. I'd glance at the clock every few minutes past 7:05, my eyes drifting to his empty booth by the window. The sunlight streamed in as always, casting long shadows across the checkered floor, but without him unfolding his newspaper, the diner felt off balance, like a puzzle missing a piece. I wiped counters that were already clean, refilled salt shakers that didn't need it all, while a knot tightened in my chest. Maybe he was under the weather, I told myself. Or perhaps he'd found another spot with better coffee. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. By the second day, the absence gnawed at me. Emily had woken up that morning with a slight cough, nothing serious, but it reminded me of her doctor's appointment coming up. Her heart condition, congenital, the specialist called it, required regular monitoring, and the bills were stacking up like unpaid tabs. I couldn't afford a flare-up, not on my wages. During my break, I asked Margie if she'd heard anything about the old man. "Henry, nah, honey, he keeps to himself. Probably just skipped town or something." The trucker shrugged. The office folks barely remembered him. Even the newspaper guy who dropped off the daily shook his head. Quiet fella. Pays cash, no chit-chat. No one knew where he lived, what he did outside those 10 minutes each morning. He was a ghost, in plain sight. On the third day, the worry turned to a dull ache. Emily's teacher had sent a note home about her tiring easily during recess, and I spent the evening on the phone with the clinic begging for a payment plan. "Mr. Walker, we can squeeze her in next week, but you'll need to cover the co-pay up front." I hung up staring at the tin box on my shelf where my old sketches gathered dust. How had I fallen so far from the architect who'd once dreamed of building community centers? That night, I sketched a quick bridge for Emily, leaving it by her bed with my usual note. But sleep evaded me. Henry's empty seat haunted my thoughts. The fourth morning dawned gray and overcast, the Texas sky threatening rain. I arrived at Margie's early, flipping the open sign and brewing the first pot. 7:05 came and went. No Henry. I busied myself with the breakfast rush eggs over easy for the regulars, pancakes for a family passing through, but my mind wandered. What if he'd fallen ill alone? What if no one checked on him? The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Then at 7:08, tires crunched on the gravel outside. I looked up through the window and saw a sleek black Mercedes pull up, its polished exterior gleaming under the diner lights. It wasn't the kind of car that stopped at Margie's. We got rusty pickups and dented sedans, not luxury sedans that screamed money. A tall man in a sharp suit emerged, adjusting his tie as he scanned the storefront. He carried an old leather briefcase scuffed at the edges like it had seen better days. Pushing open the door, the bell jingled softly. His eyes swept the room past the boots, the counter, and locked on me. "Mr. Liam Walker." His voice was calm, professional, with a hint of formality that made my skin prickle. I set down the coffee pot, wiping my hands on my apron. "That's me. How can I help you?" He extended a hand, his grip firm. "Terrence Nolan. I'm an attorney with Nolan & Associates. I'm here regarding Henry Elridge." The name hit like a punch. Henry, is he all right? He hasn't been in for days. Terrence's expression softened, but only slightly. "I'm afraid Mr. Elridge passed away peacefully on Sunday night. In his sleep, from what the medical examiner said. No pain." The words slammed into me. "Passed away, Henry?" The diner spun for a moment. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Images flashed his crinkled eyes, the way he'd nod at my stories about Emily, the quiet "thank you" after I'd warmed his towel. "That can't be," I muttered. "He was just here last week." We talked about the weather, about Emily's drawings. Terrence nodded sympathetically. "I understand this is a shock. Henry spoke highly of you in his final arrangements. He'd like you to come to my office downtown. There's something we need to discuss, his estate." Estate, the word hung in the air like it didn't belong. Henry, with his frayed shirts and exact change tips, had an estate. I shook my head. Look, I appreciate you coming all this way, but there must be a mistake. I was just his waiter. We chatted mornings, that's all. No mistake, Mr. Walker. Henry was very specific. Terrence glanced around the diner, lowering his voice as a few customers eyed us curiously. My office is at 500 Main Street, Suite 1200. Can you make it this afternoon around 2 p.m.? I hesitated, thinking of my shift of Emily's school pickup, but the look in his eyes, serious, insistent, pushed me to agree. All right, I'll be there. He nodded, handing me a business card before turning to leave. The Mercedes purred away, leaving me staring at the empty booth again. The rest of the morning dragged. Margie covered for me when I explained vaguely about a family matter. On the bus ride downtown, my mind raced. Who was Henry really? Why me Nolan and Associates occupied a sleek high-rise in the heart of Dallas, all glass and steel, a far cry from Margie's sticky floors. The elevator whisked me to the 12th floor, where a receptionist led me to Terrence's office. It smelled of polished wood and fresh espresso with leather chairs and a view of the city skyline that made my head spin. Terrence greeted me warmly, gesturing to a seat. Thank you for coming, Liam. Before we proceed, can you confirm how you knew Henry? Just from the diner, I said, sinking into the chair. He came in every morning for coffee and the special. We talked a bit about life, my daughter. Nothing deep. Terrence opened a file on his desk. Henry Joseph Elridge wasn't just any regular. He was the co-founder of Elridge Randall Holdings, a real estate empire worth billions. He stepped away from the spotlight 25 years ago after a betrayal by his business partner. Lived anonymously ever since, no family, no close friends. I blinked. Processing. Billions. The man who tipped exactly $1. That can't be right. He dressed like he was struggling. A choice, Terrence replied. He valued simplicity. In his will, he left specific instructions. He slid a document across the desk. To you, Liam, he bequeathed his penthouse in Turtle Creek valued at $2.7 million. And to your daughter, Emily, 12% of his shares in Elridge Randall. The room tilted. What? No, that's impossible. I can't accept that. We were just acquaintances. Terrence leaned forward. Henry was adamant. He said you were the only one who remembered his name every day, the only one who showed genuine kindness without expecting anything. Now, he paused, then handed me the scuffed leather briefcase. He also left this for you. Instructions were clear. Only you open it and not here. I took it, the leather cool and worn under my fingers. My mind reeled questions about Henry, about what I'd missed, about how this could change everything for Emily. But doubt crept in. Was this real? Or some elaborate mistake? As I left the office, briefcase in hand, the city buzzed below. I headed home, heart pounding, wondering what secrets it held. That night, after tucking Emily into bed, I sat alone in the dim light of our apartment, the leather briefcase resting on the kitchen table like a relic from another life. The city noise filtered through the thin walls, honks from distant cars, the murmur of neighbors, but inside it was silent, save for the tick of the clock and Emily's soft breathing from the next room. My hands trembled as I traced the worn edges of the case, its brass clasps cold under my fingers. Terrence's words echoed in my head. Only you, open it, and not here. Well, this was home as humble as it was peeling wallpaper, a fridge that hummed too loud, and a table scarred from years of meals scraped together on a budget. I flipped the latches, the click echoing in the quiet. The lid creaked open, revealing a jumble of papers yellowed with age. At the top lay a stack of blueprints rolled loosely and tied with faded string. I unrolled one carefully, my architect's eye recognizing the precision, immediately sketches of community buildings, parks with winding paths, centers designed for gatherings and healing. Notes in the margins in neat looping handwriting for the forgotten ones. These were from Princeton, dated decades ago, before whatever betrayal had driven Henry into hiding. My breath caught. These weren't just drawings. They were dreams abandoned like mine in that tin box under my bed. Beneath them was a small notebook, leather-bound like the briefcase, its pages filled with dated entries. I flipped through, my heart pounding. Each one chronicled our mornings at Margie's, October 12th. Liam brought the coffee hot today. Asked about the rain. Kind eyes. November 3rd. Told him about Emily's horse drawing. He smiled, first real one in years. Every conversation, every small gesture, I'd made the towel on the rainy day, the extra croissant was noted in meticulous detail. It was like reading a diary of my own kindness reflected back through his eyes. Tears blurred the ink as I realized Henry hadn't just been listening. He'd been cherishing those moments, hoarding them like treasures in his solitary world. Tucked at the bottom was an envelope sealed with wax, my name written across it in that same elegant script. I broke the seal, unfolding the 2 pages inside. The letter began, "Dear Liam, if you're reading this, then I've finally found peace. I was a Henry Joseph Elridge, once a name that meant power and wealth, co-founder of an empire that spanned cities and fortunes. But 25 years ago, my partner betrayed me, stole everything we'd built, left me broken and distrustful. I walked away from it all, choosing anonymity over the spotlight. No family, no friends. For 2 decades, I spoke to no one beyond necessities. Walls up, heart closed. Until that first morning at Margie's when you set down the coffee and said, 'Good morning, sir. Can I start you with this?' No pity, no agenda. Just genuine care. You ignored the warnings, the whispers that I was unapproachable. Day after day, you chipped away comments on the weather offers of toast questions that showed you saw me as a person, not a shadow. I resisted at first, but your persistence wasn't pushy. It was kind. And when you shared about Emily, her drawings, her dreams, something cracked inside me. She reminded me of my little sister lost too young to a heart ailment much like hers. I couldn't save her, but listening to you, I felt a flicker of purpose again. The world took everything from me. Liam, trust, joy, connection. But you gave it back without knowing. You didn't do it for gain. You did it because someone should. In you, I saw the man I wished I'd been, resilient, selfless, rich in ways money can't buy. That's why I'm leaving you the penthouse, my quiet retreat in Turtle Creek, and the shares for Emily. Not because you're poor, but because you're richer than any billionaire I ever knew. Use it to build those dreams you sketched on napkins, for the forgotten ones, like I was. Thank you for remembering my name, for seeing me. Yours, Henry J. Elridge." The pages shook in my hands as sobs racked my body. I slumped over the table, tears soaking the letter. For the first time in years since holding my wife's hand in that sterile hospital room, watching her slip away, I cried not from loss, but from being truly seen. Henry hadn't just been a customer. He'd been a mirror, reflecting back the parts of me I'd buried under survival. His words pierced through the numbness. I wasn't just a waiter scraping by. I was kind, persistent, a father fighting for his daughter. And in his isolation, he'd found solace in that. Wiping my eyes, I looked again at the blueprints. These weren't random. They were his unfinished symphony community spaces for the lonely, the overlooked. My own sketches flashed in my mind, bridges connecting people, centers, fostering dreams. Henry had left me more than money. He'd left a legacy, a chance to revive the architect in me. For Emily's sake, for the surgery, she might need the future she deserved. I couldn't turn it away. This wasn't charity. It was trust, a bridge from his pain to my hope. I picked up the phone, dialing Terrence's number from the card. It was late, but he answered on the second ring. Liam, everything all right? I've opened it, I said, my voice steady now, and I accept all of it. There was a pause, then relief in his tone. Henry would be pleased. We'll start the paperwork tomorrow. Hanging up, I felt a weight lift replaced by resolve. The briefcase sat open, its contents spilling light into my dim life. For the first time in forever, I saw a path forward, not just surviving, but building something real. 6 months later, everything had changed, yet in the quiet corners of my life, echoes of the old remained. Emily's surgery had gone perfectly. The doctors at the Children's Hospital in Dallas marveled at how well her heart responded. The congenital weakness finally mended with the help of specialists I could now afford. She bounded out of bed each morning, her cheeks rosy, her laughter filling our new home like sunlight through open windows. We'd moved into Henry's penthouse in Turtle Creek, a spacious place with floor-to-ceiling views of the city skyline and a rooftop terrace where Emily planted her first herb garden. It wasn't ostentatious. Henry had kept it simple with worn leather chairs and shelves lined with books on architecture and history. I sold off a few unnecessary items to fund what mattered most, but the space felt like a gift, tailored just for us, a sanctuary where Emily could dream without the shadow of illness hanging over her. She started at a private school nearby, one with art programs and small classes, thanks to a full scholarship from the newly formed L. Ridge Randall Foundation. Terrence and I had set it up together, channeling part of the estate into grants for kids like Emily, those facing medical hardships or chasing creative passions. I'd insisted on naming it after Henry, and Terrence handled the legal side with his usual efficiency. This is what he would have wanted, Terrence said during our first board meeting, his voice steady as we signed the papers. The Foundation's first project was already underway, a community center in South Dallas designed around Henry's old blueprints from the briefcase. I dusted off my own sketches, merging them with his bridges connecting neighborhoods, open spaces for gatherings, rooms for art classes, and support groups. Construction broke ground last month, and every time I visited the site, I felt Henry's presence in the lines and curves, a legacy rising from paper to reality. But I hadn't abandoned my roots. With some of the inheritance, I bought Margie's diner outright. Margie herself was thrilled to retire, handing over the keys with a tearful hug. You've always been the heart of this place, Liam. I kept the staff on, even hired a couple more, and made a few updates, a fresh coat of paint, new booths, but preserved the neon sign and checkered floors. Every Monday morning, I worked the early shift myself, brewing the coffee strong and black just like Henry preferred. It was my ritual, a way to honor those 10 minutes that had changed everything. The regulars noticed the difference, the free muffins for kids, the extra smiles, but they didn't know the full story. To them, I was still Liam, the guy who'd always been there. Emily thrived in ways I'd only dreamed of. She'd sketch bridges and buildings at the kitchen table, her crayons flying across the paper. Daddy, this one's for the center. See, it has a big room for horse drawings. I'd laugh, pulling her into a hug, marveling at how her energy had returned. One afternoon at her school pickup, I met Sarah, her art teacher. She was warm and vibrant, with a laugh that reminded me of better days. Emily talks about you all the time, she said, her eyes sparkling. The dad who's building a whole center for mold drawings. We started chatting first about Emily's projects, then over coffee after parent-teacher nights. Sarah had her own losses, a brother gone too young, and she understood the quiet battles I fought. It wasn't rushed. It built slowly, like my mornings with Henry. Walks in the park, shared dinners where Emily beamed at having family time. One evening, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Sarah took my hand. "You've got a good heart, Liam. That's what drew me in." We became a family, not replacing what I'd lost, but adding to it. Emily calling her Aunt Sarah at first, then just Sarah, with hugs that said more than words. One crisp Monday morning, as I poured coffee at the diner, a skinny kid about Emily's age wandered in alone, his clothes too big and his eyes downcast. He slid onto a stool at the counter, fumbling with a few coins. "Just water, please." I recognized that look, the quiet hunger, the invisible weight. Without a word, I fixed him a plate of eggs and toast, sliding it over with a mug of hot chocolate. He looked up, startled. "I can't pay for that." "It's on the house," I said, leaning on the counter. "Good morning, Elijah. I'm glad you're here." His name, I'd overheard him mutter it to himself earlier. He blinked, then smiled, tentative at first, then wide. "Thanks, mister." In that moment, watching him eat, I felt the full circle close. Henry's kindness, born from his own loneliness, had flowed through me to this boy. A simple greeting, a free meal. It wasn't about money or grand gestures. It was about seeing someone, really seeing them in a world that often looked away. I'd been that invisible man, once pouring coffee without a name. Now, with Emily's health secured, the foundation growing, and Sarah by my side, I understood one small act could ripple outward, changing lives in ways you'd never predict. If there's a lesson in all this, it's that a single good morning can bridge the widest gaps if you're brave enough to say it. Have you ever had a kindness that turned your world around? Share it. I'd love to hear.